The slap landed on her face before she could even say her name. Not in anger. Not in warning. But in the house where everyone bowed to fear. It was the one moment no one saw coming. And the most dangerous part wasn't the slap. It was what happened when no one moved to stop it. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, pause for a second and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And subscribe, because this story doesn't get quieter after this moment. It gets heavier. The sound didn't echo. That was the first thing people noticed. In a hall built for ceremonies, speeches, and applause, the slap landed with a dull, flesh-on-flesh finality, like something that had been waiting years to happen. For half a second, nobody breathed. The maids along the wall stood frozen, hands mid-air, mouths parted, eyes wide with the kind of fear that doesn't scream. The guards near the doors didn't move. Even the chandeliers above seemed to hold their light. And at the center of it all stood the woman everyone feared. Or rather, stood the woman who had just lost that power. Her head was turned sharply to the side, dark hair falling across her face, lips parted in disbelief. One hand hovered uselessly in front of her, as if her body hadn't yet caught up to what had just happened. Across from her, the new black maid hadn't stepped back. Her arm was still raised, trembling not from regret, but from the aftershock of releasing something she had held inside for far too long. No one shouted. No one rushed forward. Because in this house, there had always been rules. And one of them was simple. You never touched the Korean Mafia Fiancée. This mansion didn't operate like a home. It operated like a system. Every hallway, every polished floor, every silent corner had a purpose. People moved through it the way clockwork moves through gears, quietly, precisely, without deviation. The staff had learned early what mistakes cost. A glance held too long. A question asked one time too many. A hesitation where obedience was expected. None of it required shouting to correct. The consequences were subtle. A schedule changed. A name erased from the roster. A room suddenly reassigned. And at the center of it all was her. The fiancée. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to make conversations trail off mid-sentence. Enough to make seasoned guards straighten their posture. Enough to make maids lower their eyes instinctively, even when she hadn't looked their way. No one knew much about her past. And no one asked. All they knew was what she represented. Marriage into the Seo family wasn't romance. It was alignment. It was power formalized. It was the merging of bloodlines that had survived things history books never recorded. And she carried that weight like armor. Until that morning. Until the day the new maid arrived. Her name was Amora. At least, that was the name on the staff ledger. She hadn't drawn attention when she first walked through the doors. No dramatic entrance. No nervous stumbles. Just a quiet presence with observant eyes and a posture that didn't bend as easily as the others. She learned the rules quickly. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't linger. Don't ask questions. And most importantly, don't look at her. Amora followed every rule. At first. She worked the West Wing. Early mornings. Late evenings. The kind of hours where exhaustion kept people compliant. But there were things she noticed. How conversations stopped when the fiancé entered a room. How senior staff flinched, not visibly, but internally. How even kindness from her came with a cold distance, like it was being measured. And there were other things too. Things that didn't match the legend. Moments when the fiancé thought no one was watching, her shoulders slumping for half a second. Her jaw tightening when she read certain messages. The way her gaze lingered on reflections in the mirror, as if she were searching for something that no longer answered back. Amora saw those moments. Not because she was curious. But because she was paying attention. And because she understood something most people didn't. Power doesn't erase fear. It hides it. The incident didn't begin with shouting. That's what shocked everyone later. It began quietly. A misunderstanding over an assignment. A tray delivered late. A minor deviation that should have been corrected with a word and forgotten within minutes. Instead, the fiancé stopped walking. The hall fell silent. She turned slowly, eyes settling on Amora like a judgment already passed. "This isn't where you were instructed to be," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Amora lowered her gaze. Apologized once. Adjusted the tray. That should have been the end. But the fiancé stepped closer. Too close. Close enough for the air between them to feel crowded. "Do you know who you're standing in front of?" she asked. Amora hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But in this house, hesitation was louder than defiance. The fiancé smiled faintly. Not a cruel smile. A controlled one. "You don't," she said. "That's the problem." Something shifted then. Not visibly. But Amora felt it. That familiar tightening in her chest. The old reflex to shrink. To swallow words. To disappear into obedience. She had lived that way once. She had promised herself never again. "I know exactly who you are," Amora said quietly. The hall inhaled. The fiancé's smile vanished. "And yet," Amora continued, lifting her eyes, "you don't know me." The words weren't shouted. They were calm. And that made them dangerous. The fiancé's hand moved first. Not to strike. To assert. A step forward. A raised finger. A gesture meant to remind everyone watching exactly where power sat today. That was when it happened. The slap landed on her face before she could even say her name. Not in anger. Not in warning. Just sudden. Final. Unmistakable. The sound cut through the room like glass breaking underwater. Her head snapped to the side. Hair flying. Breath stolen. And the house, this place that had been built on control, lost it. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered her name in disbelief. A maid near the wall dropped what she was holding, porcelain shattering against marble. Amora's hand trembled in the air. Not because she was afraid. Because she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Time did something strange after that. It stretched. Seconds felt heavy. Like they were being weighed. The fiancée slowly turned her face back, eyes wide, not with pain but with shock. No one had ever done that. Not here. Not to her. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her authority, the thing she had carried like a shield, had cracked. And everyone could see it. All eyes moved instinctively to one man. The man standing just behind her. Tall. Still. Hands relaxed at his sides. Kang Jae-won. The head of the household. The man whose silence had ended careers, erased families, rewritten futures. He didn't step forward. He didn't speak. He didn't even change his expression. He just watched. And that, more than the slap, terrified everyone. Because if he had intervened, the rules would have remained intact. But he didn't. He let the moment stand. Let the shock settle. Let the power shift, even if only by inches. Amora realized it then. This wasn't just about her anymore. Something much larger had been disrupted. The fiancée finally found her voice. "Get her out," she said, the command sharp but unsteady. The guards hesitated. Not long. But long enough. And hesitation, once introduced, spreads. Kang Jae-won raised a hand slightly. Not to stop them. To pause everything. "Leave us," he said quietly. No one argued. One by one, the staff retreated, eyes darting, hearts racing, minds already rewriting what they thought they knew about this house. Amora stood where she was. She didn't beg. She didn't apologize. She simply waited. Because whatever came next, she would face it standing. The doors closed behind the last maid. And for the first time since she had arrived, the mansion felt smaller. Trapped with consequences. Kang Jae-won looked at Amora. Then at the woman beside him. Then back at Amora again. "You knew what that would cost you," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Amora replied. "And you did it anyway." "Yes." Silence. Heavy. Measured. Finally, he spoke again. "Leave," he said to the fiancée. Her head snapped toward him. "What?" "Leave," he repeated. "For now." Her eyes searched his face for reassurance. Found none. She turned away without another word. Her footsteps echoed down the hall. When they faded, Kang Jae-won exhaled slowly. Then he looked at Amora and said something that changed everything. "We need to talk." And that conversation. That's where the real danger begins. If you think this slap was the climax, you haven't seen what silence does next. Before we continue, if you were in her position, would you apologize to survive, or stand your ground and risk everything? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you would have done in that moment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because from here on, no one stays untouched. The door closed behind the fiancé with a sound that felt heavier than the slap itself. Not a slam. Not dramatic. Just final. The echo lingered down the hall like a reminder that she hadn't left because she wanted to, but because she'd been told to. Amora stood where she was, her heartbeat loud in her ears, her fingers slowly unclenching from fists she hadn't realized she'd made. The room felt different now. Smaller. Sharper. Kang Jae-won didn't move right away. He remained where he was, posture relaxed, eyes unreadable, like he was allowing the silence to do its work first. Amora had learned something about silence long before she stepped into this house. Silence was never empty. It was a test. "So," he said finally, his voice calm, measured. "Tell me why." He didn't specify. He didn't need to. Amora swallowed once. "I won't," she replied. He raised an eyebrow, not in anger, not even surprise. "In this house," he said, "people answer when asked." "In this house," Amora replied carefully, "people are used to being afraid." That earned her a look. Not cold. Interested. "You're not afraid?" he asked. Amora didn't answer immediately. She thought of the life she'd lived before this place. The things she'd already lost. The kind of fear that settles into your bones and teaches you the cost of staying silent. "I am," she said at last. "I'm just not obedient to it." For the first time, something like amusement flickered across his face. Brief. Controlled. Dangerous. The consequences didn't come immediately. That was the mistake everyone made when they heard the story later. They assumed punishment would be swift. Loud. Visible. It wasn't. Amora returned to her quarters that night without being stopped. No guards escorted her. No orders were shouted. Dinner was served on time. The staff moved as they always had, quiet, efficient, careful. But the house had changed. And everyone felt it. Eyes followed her now. Not openly. Not obviously. But she could feel it. The senior maids whispered behind hands. Younger staff avoided her path altogether. Even the guards, men who rarely acknowledged the staff at all, watched her with expressions that weren't hostile, just uncertain. Uncertainty was new here. And uncertainty was dangerous. When Amora lay down that night, sleep didn't come easily. She replayed the moment again and again. The way the fiancé's eyes widened. The way the room froze. The way Kang Jae-won had done nothing. That last part unsettled her the most. Because mercy wasn't his reputation. The fiancé didn't appear the next morning. Or the next. Her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. Meals were quieter. Orders came through intermediaries. The staff moved like they were waiting for something to snap back into place. Amora kept her head down. She worked. She observed. And she noticed the smallest shifts. The way the head housekeeper corrected others more sharply than usual. The way assignments changed subtly, pushing certain staff farther from the main wing. The way conversations died whenever Amora entered a room. They were afraid of proximity. As if fear itself were contagious. Late that afternoon, Amora was summoned. Not to Kang Jae-won. To the fiancé. The message came without explanation. Private sitting room. East wing. The words felt like a held breath. Amora considered not going. She knew better. The sitting room was immaculate. Too immaculate. No clutter. No personal items. Just polished surfaces and controlled elegance. The fiancé stood near the window when Amora entered, her back turned, posture straight, hair perfectly in place. No sign of what had happened. Except for the tension in her shoulders. "You humiliated me," she said without turning around. Amora remained silent. In front of my staff, the fiancé continued. In front of him. Still silence. That was a mistake, she said, finally turning. Her eyes were calm, but something beneath them was fractured. One that will cost you. Amora met her gaze. I didn't plan it, she said quietly. But I don't regret it. The fiancé's jaw tightened. You think this is about pride? She asked. I think, Amora replied, it's about control. The air between them sharpened. The fiancé took a step closer. You will apologize, she said. Publicly. You will kneel. And this will end. Amora shook her head once. No. That single word hung between them like a blade. The fiancé laughed softly. You don't understand how this house works. I understand perfectly, Amora replied. That's why I won't. For a long moment, they stood there, two women measuring power in different currencies. Then the fiancé smiled. And this time, it wasn't controlled. It was deliberate. Very well, she said. Then we do this quietly. The retaliation didn't come through force. It came through isolation. Amora's schedule changed. Her assignments were moved to the least visible parts of the house. Tasks others avoided suddenly became hers. She was never yelled at. Never openly punished. But she was erased. Meals were missed because no one told her they'd moved. Supplies she needed went missing. Doors that had once been unlocked were suddenly closed. Even the staff who had whispered sympathy before now avoided her entirely. Fear spreads faster than courage. And the fiancé understood that. One night, Amora returned to her room to find it empty. Not trashed. Cleared. Her personal items gone. Her clothes folded neatly and placed in a box by the door. A message lay on the bed. You're a guest here. Don't forget it. Her hands trembled not with fear, but with anger. She forced herself to steady. This was the game now. Psychological. Precise. Kang Jae-won noticed. Of course he did. He noticed the way Amora grew quieter, not smaller, just sharper. The way she moved through the house like someone expecting traps. One evening, he called her in again. You're being pushed, he said without preamble. Yes. And you're still standing. Yes. Why? He asked. Amora met his gaze. Because she needs me to break, she said. And I won't give her that satisfaction. Something shifted in his expression then. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. You realize, he said slowly, that by standing your ground, you're forcing a choice. Yes. Between you, he continued, and her. Amora didn't flinch. I know. Silence settled again. Then he said something that made her breath hitch. She's not used to losing. Neither am I, Amora replied. For the first time, he smiled openly. Not warmly, but honestly. The fiancé made her next move that same night. A meeting was called. Staff gathered. Whispers spread. Amora was summoned front and center. The fiancé stood beside Kang Jae-won, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. This house, she began, runs on respect. Her eyes flicked briefly to Amora. And discipline. Amora waited. She didn't bow. She didn't apologize. She didn't move. The fiancé turned to Kang Jae-won, her voice smooth. This situation has gone on long enough, she said. You need to choose. Every eye in the room turned to him. The house held its breath again. Kang Jae-won looked at Amora. Then at the woman beside him. Then back at the room. And in that moment, everyone realized something terrifying. This was no longer about a slap. It was about who held the future of this house. He spoke quietly. This isn't the time, he said. The fiancé's smile faltered, just slightly. When will it be? She pressed. When you're ready to hear the answer, he replied. The room erupted in whispers. Because hesitation, from him, was unheard of. And hesitation meant weakness. Or strategy. That night, Amora lay awake again. But this time, fear wasn't what kept her from sleeping. It was clarity. She had crossed into a war she hadn't planned, but one she couldn't walk away from. The fiancé would not stop. And Kang Jae-won was watching. Not protecting her. Not condemning her. Studying her. And that made her realize something chilling. The most dangerous part of this house wasn't the slap. Wasn't the power. Wasn't even the threats. It was the man deciding which woman would remain standing when the dust settled. And she had no idea which side he would choose. If you think the danger ends here, you haven't seen what happens when reputation becomes a weapon. Before we continue, I need you to answer this honestly. If power was taken from you without violence, would you fight louder or smarter? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which choice you'd make. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because after this point, there is no going back for anyone in this house. The announcement was subtle. That was the first warning sign. No raised voices. No confrontation. Just a change in protocol delivered with calm efficiency. A gathering. Mandatory. All senior staff. All department heads. Attendance required. Amora knew immediately this wasn't about discipline. It was about narrative. The grand hall filled slowly. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps. People took their places the way soldiers do when they know inspection is coming. At the front of the room stood the fiancée. Poised. Immaculate. Untouched by the chaos she'd unleashed. Kang Jae-won stood a step behind her, expression unreadable, posture neutral. That alone unsettled the room. He never stood behind anyone. Amora took her place near the side, spine straight, hands clasped loosely in front of her. She didn't bow. She didn't look down. And several people noticed. The fiancée began to speak. This household, she said smoothly, has always functioned on trust. A pause. Recently, that trust has been challenged. Eyes flicked instinctively toward Amora. She didn't react. Disruptions, the fiancé continued, no matter how small, create instability. And instability is dangerous. Her gaze swept the room, then settled deliberately on Amora. Which is why we must address this openly. The hall seemed to tighten. Some staff, she said, have forgotten their place. There it was. Not accusation. Positioning. Amora felt the shift immediately, the way people leaned back from her space. The way fear moved faster than logic. You were given an opportunity, the fiancé said calmly, to correct a mistake. To restore order. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You refused. Amora inhaled once. Slowly. The fiancé turned toward Kang Jae-won. And now, she said, voice still composed, this household needs clarity. The silence that followed was unbearable. Everyone waited for him to speak. He didn't. Not yet. Instead, he stepped forward. Not beside the fiancée. Past her. He addressed the room. There has been no formal breach of protocol, he said evenly. No theft. No disobedience of direct orders. The fiancée's jaw tightened. This is not about protocol, she said sharply. This is about authority. Kang Jae-won turned to her then. And the temperature dropped. Authority, he said, doesn't require spectacle. The room froze. Amora felt it then, the invisible line being drawn. The fiancé smiled. Not warmly. Dangerously. Very well, she said. Then let's speak of consequences. She turned back to the staff. Effective immediately, she announced, Amora will be reassigned. A ripple of reaction. To the lower quarters, she continued. Her access restricted. Her duties supervised. Exile. Without dismissal. The perfect punishment. You can't, someone started. The fiancé lifted a hand. This is my decision. All eyes turned to Kang Jae-won. He said nothing. And that silence, his silence, landed harder than any slap. Amora understood it instantly. This wasn't protection. It was permission. The reassignment worked exactly as intended. Amora was moved that night. Smaller room. Dimmer light. No view. Her schedule became grueling. Tasks others avoided landed squarely on her shoulders. And still, she didn't break. That infuriated the fiancé more than any rebellion could have. Because compliance was expected. Resistance was manageable. Endurance, that was dangerous. The staff began to notice. Not loudly, not openly, but they noticed the way Amora moved through the house with her head high despite everything. The way she completed tasks without complaint. The way she met eyes without apology. Quiet admiration started to replace fear. And admiration is contagious. The fiancé escalated. This time, she made it personal. A rumor surfaced. Quiet. Strategic. Whispered through the right channels. Amora was unstable. Aggressive. A liability. The story grew legs. Assignments were questioned. Mistakes were exaggerated. Incidents reframed. Amora found herself watched not for errors, but for justification. One evening, she was summoned again. Not to the fiancé. To Kang Jae-won. His office was dimly lit, walls lined with artifacts that spoke of legacy and consequence. He didn't invite her to sit. "You're being tested," he said. "I know," Amora replied. "And you're failing." She looked at him sharply. "In what way?" "In the way that matters," he said. "You're becoming visible." She didn't look away. That was inevitable. "Visibility," he said calmly, "is expensive. So is silence," she countered. He studied her for a long moment. "You don't understand the forces you're challenging." "I understand them perfectly," Amora said. "I just refuse to be crushed by them." He leaned back slightly. "And if your refusal costs you everything?" Amora met his gaze without hesitation. "Then at least it will be mine." Something shifted then. Not approval. Not anger. Recognition. The breaking point came 3 days later. A formal dinner. High-profile guests. External allies. Appearances mattered. Amora was assigned service. Front-facing. Deliberate. The fiancé watched her closely as she moved through the room, graceful, controlled, unbowed. The guests noticed too. Questions were asked. Who is she? She carries herself differently. There's something about her. The fiancé felt it slipping. Power doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes. One moment at a time. At the end of the evening, as the last guest departed, the fiancé made her move. She approached Amora publicly. Close enough for everyone to hear. "You've enjoyed the attention," she said coolly. Amora didn't respond. "You forget," the fiancé continued, "who allows you to stand in this room." Amora lifted her gaze slowly. "I stand here," she said evenly, "because I was assigned to." A murmur ran through the staff. The fiancé's eyes flashed. "You will address me properly." Amora paused. "Just long enough." "I will," she said. "When you do the same." The room went silent. Kang Jae-won stepped forward instantly. "That's enough," he said. The fiancé turned to him, disbelief cracking her composure. "You're letting this continue?" she demanded. "I'm stopping it," he replied. "By silencing me," she snapped. "No," he said quietly. "By ending this." The words hung heavy. "End what?" she asked. He met her gaze. "This engagement." The room exploded. Gasps. Whispers. Shock rippling outward. The fiancé stared at him as if she hadn't heard correctly. "You're choosing her?" she asked. Kang Jae-won shook his head slowly. "I'm choosing stability." Her laughter was sharp, brittle. "You think this ends with me walking away," she said. "You have no idea what you've just started." She turned her gaze on Amora. "This isn't over," she said softly. Then she walked out. This time, without being told. The house didn't settle afterward. It fractured. Alliances shifted. Loyalties blurred. The absence of the fiancé left a vacuum, and vacuums demand to be filled. Amora stood alone that night in her new quarters. Not lower. Higher. Reassigned again. Promoted. Protected. But protection came with a price. Kang Jae-won stood in the doorway, watching her take in the room. "You've made yourself indispensable," he said. "I didn't intend to," Amora replied. "But I won't apologize for it." He nodded. "You should know," he said, "she won't accept this quietly." "I know." And when she returns, he continued, it won't be for reconciliation. Amora met his gaze. I'll be ready. He studied her. For the first time, not as a risk, but as a force. What neither of them said out loud was the most dangerous truth of all. The slap had been the beginning. The humiliation had been the spark. But what was coming next was war. And in this house, war never stayed contained. If you think survival was the goal, wait until you see what revenge costs. The house felt wrong without her. That was the first truth no one wanted to admit. The corridors were quieter, but not calmer. Orders moved faster, but with hesitation. The staff obeyed Kang Jae-won now without question, but something had been lost in the transition. Fear had been replaced with uncertainty. And uncertainty is unstable. Amora sensed it every time she walked through the main hall. Conversations lowered when she passed. Eyes followed her with something close to or is fragile. It curdles quickly when tested. She hadn't asked for influence. But influence had found her anyway. And influence attracts consequences. The fiancé returned exactly 7 days later. Not through the front gate. Through the press. The news broke quietly at first. A financial ripple. A corporate inquiry. A frozen account that shouldn't have been touched. Then the second wave hit. A sealed investigation reopened. One Kang Jae-won had buried years ago with careful precision and silence. The house woke to tension thick enough to taste. Amora read the headline twice, then a third time, to be sure she wasn't imagining it. The fiancé hadn't come back with emotion. She'd come back with leverage. Kang Jae-won didn't summon Amora this time. He came to her. His expression was composed, but she recognized the signs now, the tightened jaw, the stillness that meant calculation. She's forcing a reckoning, he said. With you, Amora replied. With us, he corrected. Amora folded her arms slowly. She wants the house, she said. Or you. He nodded. She knows she can't have both. And what do you want? Amora asked. He didn't answer immediately. Because this time, the truth mattered. I want control, he said finally. Without chaos. Amora held his gaze. Then you're going to have to stop treating me like a variable, she said. And start treating me like a choice. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not disagreement. Recognition. The fiancé's terms arrived that night. Not written. Delivered in person. She stood in the same grand hall where everything had unraveled, dressed impeccably, face calm, power worn like silk. The staff lined the walls again. History repeating itself. Only this time, no one bowed. She smiled when she noticed. You've trained them quickly, she said, eyes sliding to Amora. Amora said nothing. The fiancé turned to Kang Jae-won. You made a decision without considering the cost, she said. Now I'm collecting. You've endangered the house, he replied. I've protected it, she countered. From instability. Her gaze snapped to Amora. From her. A murmur ran through the room. Amora stepped forward before Kang Jae-won could stop her. No, she said calmly. From the illusion that fear is loyalty. The fiancé laughed softly. You think you've changed something, she asked. You think one moment of defiance rewrites years of order? I think, Amora replied evenly, that order built on silence always collapses. The fiancé's smile faded. Then let's end this, she said. Publicly. The ultimatum was simple. Brutal. Clean. Kang Jae-won could restore the engagement. Reinstate the fiancé. Remove Amora quietly. Or she would release everything. Financial records. Names. Proof. The house would survive. But Kang Jae-won wouldn't. The staff watched in breathless silence. This was no longer a private war. This was judgment. All eyes turned to Amora. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She had become the axis. Kang Jae-won looked at her not with command, not with expectation, but with a question. It wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. If he chose her, the house would burn and rebuild. If he chose safety, she would disappear. Amora understood the cost either way. And for the first time since she'd arrived, she made a decision not out of survival, but out of identity. She stepped forward. "You won't choose," she said. Both of them turned toward her. "I will," she continued. The room froze. Amora faced the fiancé. "You're right," she said calmly. "Power never forgives humiliation." The fiancé's eyes narrowed. "But what you don't understand," Amora went on, "is that you already lost the moment you needed him to speak for you." The fiancé laughed sharply. "And what do you think you've won?" Amora inhaled slowly. "Myself." Then she turned to Kang Jae-won. "You don't need to destroy the house," she said. "And you don't need to submit to her." He watched her carefully. "There's a third option," she said. Amora addressed the room. "The staff. The guards. The witnesses. You all know what this house was built on," she said. "And you know what it costs. Silence. You've lived under fear," she continued. "And you've mistaken it for stability." She turned to the fiancé. "You threaten exposure," Amora said. "But you won't pull the trigger." The fiancé's smile vanished. "You need leverage," Amora continued. "And leverage only works if you're willing to burn everything, including yourself." She paused. "You're not." A beat. The fiancé's hand clenched. Amora turned to Kang Jae-won. "End the engagement publicly," she said. "Release the staff from silence contracts. Restructure the house." Gasps rippled. "And you," she added, turning back to the fiancé, "walk away with dignity intact." The fiancé stared at her. "You think I'd accept that?" "I think," Amora replied quietly, "you already know this ends one way. I'm just offering you control over how." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Kang Jae-won spoke. "She's right," he said. The fiancé looked at him sharply. "This house survives by evolution," he continued. "Not fear." The words landed. Final. The fiancé laughed once. Low. Bitter. "You've chosen," she said. "No," he replied. "You forced me." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she straightened. "Very well," she said. "Enjoy what you've built." She turned to leave. This time, the doors opened for her without hesitation. The house changed after that. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But permanently. Contracts were revised. Staff spoke more freely. Fear loosened its grip, inch by inch. And Amora? She stayed. Not as a maid. Not as a symbol. But as something far more dangerous. A reminder. Kang Jae-won stood beside her one evening, watching the staff move through the hall. "You could have taken more," he said. "I took what mattered," Amora replied. "And if she comes back?" he asked. Amora met his gaze. "Then she'll find a house that no longer bows." He studied her for a long moment. Not with possession. With respect. The slap had shattered silence. But what followed? What followed had rewritten power. And the most dangerous thing about Amora was never her defiance. It was that she knew exactly who she was. When fear stopped speaking for her. If this story made you feel something, anger, relief, clarity, say so in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you stayed till the end, subscribe. Because the next story asks an even harder question. What happens when power answers back, and you don't flinch?